Behold ancient Egypt. Today it is a famous tourist hotspot partly thanks to its luxurious necropolises, but in the millennia before Christ, it was one of the most vibrant and powerful empires on earth. At the top of this kingdom were the pharaohs, the rulers of the Nile and its surroundings. We're going to talk about someone whom I bet many people have never heard of, and until about 100 years ago, no one in the world had really heard of. Hatshepsut. Early 16th century BC in Thebes, a little girl was born around 15th BC named Hatshepsut, a name that means foremost of noble ladies. And this name was not simple at all, not a name that ordinary ancient Egyptian parents were allowed to give their daughters. Hatshepsut's father was a man named Thutmose I. He was a charismatic and, by all accounts, very effective leader who came to power around 1500 BCE. As a military man who expanded the Egyptian kingdom by force, there was a story about Thutmose sailing home to Thebes with the corpse of a defeated enemy dangling from his ship, as a warning to anyone foolish enough to challenge the pharaoh. Her mother was the great royal wife Ahmose, essentially the most elite woman among all elite women of ancient Egypt. And because of that, Hatshepsut was, of course, a high-born princess. And because she was a princess whose father was the pharaoh and mother the great royal wife, from childhood, Hatshepsut did not study physics or chemistry. Her first lesson was memorizing the names of all relatives in her genealogy, a family line obsessed with the name Thutmose to the point that Hatshepsut was surrounded by a whole bunch of Thutmoses.
You are Thutmoses. You are Thutmoses too. You Thutmoses.
After memorizing who is this Thutmose, who is that Thutmose, she was taught two main subjects, diplomacy and religion. Diplomacy included how to walk, how to bow, how to say one sentence in a way that made three ancient Egyptian tribes all feel respected. Religion required Hatshepsut to memorize which god was which, and how many offerings were enough to make the gods happy and grant blessings to ancient Egypt. Just those subjects alone could never hinder someone as intelligent as Hatshepsut. She soon held the title of God's Wife of Amun, an incredibly prestigious religious role. The God's Wife of Amun was the supreme priestess in rituals dedicated to Amun, not a wife in the earthly sense, but a symbolic ceremonial partner representing the union between God and woman, ensuring cycles of creation, fertility, and legitimate kingship. This was a position that held half the power of ancient Egypt in the palm of its hand, and Hatshepsut attained it very early, even as a child, partly because her parents were absolute titans at the time, and partly because Hatshepsut herself was no ordinary girl. She possessed exceptional soft skills, knowing how to use her voice and expressions to turn rituals into political power. And as for hard skills, she mastered writing, notes, and symbols on the mystical stone reliefs of ancient Egypt. And above all, she understood court law. She understood that, if she wanted to survive in an environment where relatives were more numerous than temple statues, she had to be better than everyone. And although their spirits may live forever, the physical body of every pharaoh eventually decays. When that moment came for Hatshepsut's father, Pharaoh Thutmose I, even though Hatshepsut was the daughter of Thutmose I and Queen Ahmose, the throne did not pass to her but instead to the sickly Thutmose I, the son of Thutmose I with a secondary wife of non-royal lineage. Because although ancient Egyptians did not forbid women from becoming pharaohs, in their long history before Hatshepsut, there had already been 5 female pharaohs, including Cleopatra. Deep in their minds, they still wanted the pharaoh to be a man, due to the belief that the king was a deity, a descendant of the sun god Ra, and that men were often seen as the embodiment of strength and authority in society. At this time, Hatshepsut had reached the age of coming of age, becoming a beautiful and noble young lady. According to a rather disturbing custom, royal children often married their siblings, and when she was around 12 years old, Hatshepsut married her half-brother, Thutmose II, the new pharaoh, who took the name Thutmose II after inheriting the throne from Thutmose I. You know, the best way to maintain a dynasty is through a little bit of incest. But with his weak body, Thutmose II died not long after ascending the throne, and Hatshepsut had only given birth to one daughter by the time her husband died, a little princess named Neferura. Therefore, the throne once again passed not to the queen's child, but to a son born to another woman in Thutmose II's harem. The kingdom of Egypt would again be ruled by someone with the appropriate name of Thutmose III, and he was a man, or rather, not yet a man. And that's where the problem appeared. At that moment, when Thutmose III was declared king of all Egypt, he was a child, he was a tiny little boy. But Egypt needed someone to keep the throne warm, while Thutmose III learned the necessary skills to lead, such as how to command an army, and how not to poop in his diaper. Because Thutmose III's mother was of low status, Hatshepsut, who had been part of the royal family since birth, took over as queen regent. Essentially, she had the best resume for the job. She was like a temporary employee, if you want to call it that. In the first years, everything went according to plan. Thutmose III learned and grew, while Hatshepsut handled the busy work of ruling all of ancient Egypt. However, sometime before Thutmose turned 8, Hatshepsut decided it was time to apply for a promotion. Enough with being a regent. She wanted to become co-pharaoh. All right then. So what did Thutmose III and the Egyptian elite do when Hatshepsut said she wanted to become co-ruler of Egypt? They asked Hatshepsut if she meant she wanted to marry her husband's son in order to become queen again. And what about Thutmose III's pharaoh status? Hatshepsut said that both she and Thutmose III would be co-pharaohs, but she would take care of, ruling. And the elite of Egypt said, okay then, yeah, that works for us, the elites. Good for them, I guess. I mean, it seems like the decision was made out of laziness, but it was still progressive. Now, to be fair to Hatshepsut, the reason everyone was okay with this was not mere coincidence. As regent, she personally chose talented outsiders to fill key positions instead of picking people from elite families. That meant that if those officials wanted to keep their positions, they needed Hatshepsut on the throne. So as the daughter of a pharaoh, the widow of another pharaoh, and the stepmother of yet another pharaoh, all of whom had the same name, not to mention being the only person on the planet with actual experience ruling Egypt. Holding the title of co-pharaoh was obvious given her overwhelming power at the time. But how did Hatshepsut secure the loyalty of the people? The answer is that she launched a public infrastructure campaign. For example, Hatshepsut built some of the largest obelisks ever constructed in Egypt, reaching 100 feet, around 30 meters tall. Now, modern city folks might not think 100 feet is impressive. Hell, the Washington Monument is a 5-foot obelisk. However, unlike the Washington Monument, ancient Egyptian obelisks were made from a single block of stone. It's like carving a 10-story apartment building out of one solid block of rock and then raising it upright. Beyond the obelisks, Hatshepsut built one of the most magnificent structures in the entire ancient world. A massive temple at Deir el-Bahari. Pools and gardens filled with fragrant trees covered the lower terraces of the temple. And 100 colossal statues of Hatshepsut in Sphinx form stood guard. The walls were covered with inscriptions detailing Hatshepsut's victories as ruler. But there was one problem, a very big problem, with Hatshepsut becoming co-pharaoh. You know what it was? She was a woman.
I am co-pharaoh. I hold all of ancient Egypt in my hand, but that is not enough. I want people to remember me as a male pharaoh.
Lady Hatshepsut, but we have not yet mastered the technology of gender transition.
What the fuck are you talking about? Who wants to be a filthy man? I am a beautiful, powerful woman.
Yes, Lady Hatshepsut. How about a new hairstyle?
All right, I like that. But instead, what if we emphasize to everyone that as the daughter of a pharaoh, my mother conceived me through the god Amun, who merely took the form of my father?
I suppose we could arrange that, but Hatshepsut?
Also, that is not my name anymore. Hatshepsut. What does that even mean? My name now is Ma'at Kari. Ma'at Kari, do you understand?
And just like that, Ma'at Kare Hatshepsut was born. It was still Hatshepsut, but with an appearance she envisioned as male. Before continuing, let me quickly clarify the gender issue. Although in early statues and reliefs, Hatshepsut was depicted as a graceful woman, over time she began to be portrayed as a bare-chested man holding the crook and flail. This was not an attempt to trick people into thinking she was actually male. Egyptian art did not depict things literally, it was symbolic. Textual references still made it clear she was a woman, simply portrayed as a man with a fake beard. The full reason behind this artistic shift remains a mystery. Theories range from legitimizing her rule to soothing discomfort among those who disliked the idea that Thutmose III's co-pharaoh was a woman. So there's a lot to unpack there. Meanwhile, Thutmose III, the co-pharaoh, was still sucking his thumb, probably producing pancake-like poops. From that point onward, the image of a female pharaoh with a fake beard and strong masculine attire became deeply rooted in the minds of ancient Egyptians. While Hatshepsut gradually rebranded herself, Thutmose III was gradually transforming into a man capable of ruling Egypt on his own. Thankfully, while Hatshepsut had done an excellent job preventing any strong man with a militia and a grudge from stealing the throne, the biggest threat to her work was actually her husband's son, who, as the official pharaoh, could reclaim power from her once grown. Fortunately, by most accounts, the two had a great relationship. During Hatshepsut's reign, it would have been relatively easy for an accidental death to befall the young king. Instead, she ensured he was well prepared for life as a pharaoh, teaching him to be a scribe, priest, and soldier. He excelled in the latter and eventually became commander-in-chief of the army. All of this took place during a relatively prosperous and peaceful period for Egypt. Something every leader in history will tell you is a big problem. What to do with the army? If Hatshepsut disbanded it, Egypt would be undefended. If she sent them to war and they lost, she would be blamed and overthrown. If she sent them to war and they won, well, Thutmose III would get all the credit and her power could be weakened. So Hatshepsut, being the great ruler she was, turned this potential problem into an advantage. She sent an all-female army on a trade expedition to the mysterious and long-lost land of Punt, where no Egyptian had been in more than 500 years. The new trade route was immensely profitable, bringing ivory, incense, and rare animal skins to Egypt. Ancient records boasted, quote, "Never before have such things been brought to any king since the beginning of time." These riches earned her even more support from the elites, who loved luxurious things. In 1457 BC, after a rare 22-year reign of peace and prosperity, Hatshepsut died, finally giving Thutmose III full control of Egypt. Giving him time to learn royal rules was more than worth it, because he too enjoyed a successful reign. Using his skills as a military leader, Thutmose III expanded Egypt's control by force and helped establish Egypt as one of the wealthiest nations on earth. See what happens when you raise children well? As for Hatshepsut, thanks to her many infrastructure projects and profitable trade partnership with Punt, it seems the female pharaoh's name should have been remembered forever. Except that, until the early 1900s, no one really knew she had existed. Why had no one heard of Hatshepsut? Near the end of Thutmose III's reign, about 20 years after the death of his predecessor and stepmom, many of Hatshepsut's monuments, statues, and reliefs were destroyed and replaced with images of her husband, Thutmose II. Remember, in ancient Egypt, the consequences of this were not simply the destruction of a legacy, it literally cursed her with erasure. Without statues or inscriptions of Hatshepsut, she could no longer enjoy the eternal life those depictions promised. The reason Thutmose III tried to erase Hatshepsut's name remains a mystery that still eludes historians. Was it jealousy? Or an attempt to clean up his dynastic narrative? Whatever the reason, it was a terrible act. Because of him, all records of Hatshepsut's achievements were effectively wiped out, and it took centuries of archaeology to rediscover them. So it seems he was holding a grudge. I mean, sometimes grudges grow over time. Maybe he woke up one day and thought, you know what? Forget it. Actually, it's also possible that on the first day, he was like,
"Rest in peace, Hatshepsut. Loved her, but I'm pharaoh now, woohoo."
Then he met his advisors and they were like,
Hey, glad to have you here. By the way, Hatshepsut, oh my god, she was amazing. We really need to live up to that.
and then day after day,
Hatshepsut this, Hatshepsut that.
20 years later, he was like,
You know what? I'm tired of hearing about this woman. Let's erase her from the books.
fast forward about 300 years, a whoosh, all the way to 1903, when the famous British archaeologist Howard Carter excavated a non-royal tomb now known as KV-60. Inside were several mummified geese, the mummy of Hatshepsut's royal nurse, and another unidentified mummy, a mystery. Fast forward another 100 years to 2000, and with the help of modern technology, a CT scan confirmed that the unidentified mummy was likely Hatshepsut. Whoa! With Hatshepsut's body finally found, examinations were conducted to determine her cause of death. She was actually killed by her own lotion. CT scans performed in 2007 showed that Hatshepsut was in very poor health at her death. Evidence in the pelvis and spine indicated cancer. Among her belongings was a jar of skin lotion, which made sense, as there were dermatological issues in her family. However, in that lotion, pharmacists discovered benzopyrene, one of the most carcinogenic substances on Earth. Though we now understand more about how she died, the mystery of why her legacy was erased remains, not fully understood. However, her body has been found, and we know about her now. And she did a pretty amazing job as pharaoh. With the memory of her reign restored, her spirit can continue to live forever.